Let's take a look at some basic ideas in module number 2, which covers the subject of scarcity and choices. This is one of the key set of concepts that we'll be covering in microeconomics. So it's really important to get a very good idea about these before we move on. 3 basic concepts. First, let's review the idea of scarcity itself. Recall that scarcity is a situation in which we have unlimited wants that exceed the limited resources available to fulfill those wants. So it's 2 parts. Unlimited wants, and secondly, the limited resources available to fulfill those wants. So let's take a look at how economists look at society's resources. We call them the factors of production. There are 4 basic kinds of resources in the factors of production. The first is labor, which includes manual labor, but it also includes things as a guy flipping hamburgers at McDonald's, or a scientist studying a new formula, or an artist painting a picture, or a dentist pulling out your teeth. Second is the resource of capital. Now note, economists mean something different when they use the word capital than do financiers. To many in society, capital refers to money. In economics, capital refers to something used to produce something else. The third resource is natural resources, such as land, minerals, water, anything that we use that nature gives us to produce things. The fourth has to do with technology. Technology refers to how we produce something using tools. It could be as simple as a hoe that we use to till a garden, or something as complicated as a mainframe computer or a smartphone. With technology, we also have entrepreneurship. And this refers to the creativity used to organize the 4 factors of production. The second idea has to do with the trade-offs that come from scarcity. Recall that if we use resources to get one thing, we cannot use the same resource to get something else. We have to give up something to get something. We use the term opportunity cost to describe what we give up. We're going to keep repeating this idea again and again to become second nature because it's so key to understanding all of economic ideas. The third is that economics studies the consequences of choices made. We try to present the choices and the consequences so that the individuals, businesses, organizations, or societies can make better choices. Now, to illustrate the idea of choices and the trade-offs, economists use a very simple model called the production possibilities model to illustrate the choices. Let's take a look at one. Let's imagine a company has a choice of producing either hybrid automobiles or sedans. And they could put all of their resources into production of hybrids, or all of their resources into production of sedans, or wind up with a mixture of the 2. So let's start off with all the resources being used to produce hybrids. In this case, they could produce 100 hybrids per day, and this would result in no resources being left for sedans, so they wind up with 0. This is also illustrated in the table on the right, 100 hybrids or 0 sedans. Now, the second choice could be moving some resources from hybrid production and transfer them over to the production of sedans. So we can imagine a second point. In this case, we're winding up with 50 hybrids and 70 sedans. Okay? Or we could transfer more resources from hybrid production, thus reducing our hybrid production in order to expand the production of sedans. And here's our third option, 28 hybrids and 95 sedans. Or lastly, we could use all the resources to produce sedans, winding up with 130 sedans, but nothing's left for hybrid production. Now, you might use this chart here to practice the idea of opportunity cost. For example, if we used all of our resources to produce 100 hybrids, we wind up with 0 sedans. So we've given up 130 sedans to get those 100 hybrids. Or another way of putting it, 100 hybrids cost 130 sedans. So try this out. If we produce 50 hybrids, how many sedans do we give up? Well, if we produce 50 hybrids, we can also produce 70 sedans, which means now we've gone from 130 maximum we could have had in sedans to 70. We give up 60 sedans. So the opportunity cost of producing 50 hybrids is 60 sedans. Think about this chart and try to figure out what the opportunity cost of producing 28 hybrids is, or conversely, what is the opportunity cost of producing 95 sedans? Okay, back to our table. Let's connect these dots, and we wind up with a curve, which you notice now it's downward sloping, and we call this the production possibility line, or frontier, the PPF. Now, all points on the curve represent maximum use of resources. The maximum use, now we're being most efficient, and we're winding up with a set of choices illustrated in the table. If we're at a point inside the curve, this represents an inefficient use of resources. For example, point C says we could have 28 hybrids and 70 sedans. We know this is inefficient because over in the table it says we could have had 28 hybrids and 95 sedans. Or we could have had 70 sedans and 50 hybrids. So obviously in here we're not using our resources to the maximum efficiency. On the other hand, if we have a point outside the curve, outside the PPF, such as point D, this is not possible given existing resources. Point D says we could have 130 sedans and more than 100 hybrids. We know that's not possible. It would be possible, though, if this whole curve shifts outward or to the right. If it shifts outward, all of our choices now are greater. And that can occur by two ways: economic growth, or as we'll see later in this chapter, by trade. So to summarize, there are 6 basic ideas that we can use the production possibility model to illustrate. The first is the idea of cost, which we are going to mention almost every single chapter as we go through this course. One economist said that cost is the one key idea in all of economics. So we'll keep repeating that. Second is the concept of increasing opportunity cost. As you move from one trade-off to another, your opportunity costs constantly increase. Very interesting idea, which has applications for your personal choices as well as societies. Third is the idea of maximum use of resources. The production possibility model illustrates the maximum choices that you can get if you use your resources to maximum efficiency. Fourth is a very important idea of economic growth. And the production possibility model illustrates that by the curve shifting out to the right. With economic growth, we can have better choices at all levels. Fifth is the opposite of economic growth, and that's inefficiently using our resources. We're producing at a point inside the production possibility curve, and where choices are less. The last one is the idea of comparative advantage, a very important idea in all of economics that deals with the benefits that come from specialization and trade. So go over this introduction, read chapter 2, make sure you understand the ideas, watch the videos. Remember, review now. Review is very key to learning. Ask me questions as you're going through this module. It's very important to get a firm foundation before we get into some of the more technical chapters later on. If you understand these concepts, it's going to make the rest of the course a lot easier. So good luck and keep in touch.